Hello. So welcome back to the place where if you die in your dreams, you die for real. The Dead Hours. And I am the dream child and the future ghost with the most. Vivian Noir. That's me. On this episode of the Murder Corner, hello everyone who is joining. I drink my cute little red wines. Aren't they cute? They're adorable. I feel so classy. So on this episode of the Murder Corner, we will be discussing the crimes of one of the most notorious serial killers in U.S. history. No, not heart disease. No, that's another kind of program. No, of course, per request, we are discussing the crimes and the motives of the killer clown himself, John Wayne Gacy, which is astounding because I really hate, double hate, loathe entirely the subject of clowns and clownery in general. I was that one kid who despised everything about circuses solely because of the clowns. Like, I wanted nothing to do with circuses, nothing at all. I mean, there's cool animals and stuff at the circus, but the clowns just ruin everything, spoil the whole thing. So nope. So because I had to look at photos of pure nightmare fuel while putting the slideshow together, do be warned that this is the last time you will hear from me on the subject of clowns, on this dreaded subject. Okay, so that being said, moving on to the content warning. As always, the crimes that we are about to discuss are heinous and gruesome, and the subject matter is not made for kids or those with sensitive natures or the faint at heart. So do remember, you have been warned. That is your last warning, folks. So buckle in, because this one's going to be fun. Also, P.S., it's going to be a two-parter because there's a lot of material here. So Gacy is known as one of America's more prolific serial killers with an official victim count of 33, 26 of which were buried beneath his suburban home, and 8 of which remain unidentified to this day. He was a man who wore one face around his friends and loved ones as a generous man who gave back to his community, but beneath that false jovial smile lurked a deep darkness that would claim more than 30 young men's lives. A sadist, a sociopath, and a pure predator. But where did it all begin? Ironically enough, not far from where it ultimately ended. So let's get into it. Okay, point of order. The quote already, you guys. The quote already. I am triggered. Already starting out of the gate with a good one. Already starting out of the gate with, let's make Viv as uncomfortable as entirely possible. I'll take 500 in that category, Alex. Thank you. Awesome. All right, here we go.
When they paint the image that I was this monster who picked up like these altar boys along the street and swatted them like flies, I said, this is ludicrous.
So John Wayne Gacy was born into what most would call an unremarkable Midwestern family on March 17th, 1942. Hey, St. Patrick's Day. Lucky, but unlucky for 33 people. Just throwing that out there. He was born in Chicago, Illinois, and one could really only point to the tumultuous relationship with his father, John Wayne Gacy Sr., as the only real point of strife in his younger years. Sources describe Gacy Sr. as a belligerent, abusive alcoholic who took to physically and verbally abusing his children while in cruel tirades. His mother would try to shield John from his father's abuse, which only resulted in accusations that he was a sissy, a mama's boy, and would probably grow up queer. Father of the Year material, ladies and gentlemen. In 1949, Gacy Sr. was informed that his son and another boy had been caught sexually fondling a young girl. So Gacy at this time would have been about 7 years old. His father whipped him with a leather razor strop as punishment. That same year, a family friend and contractor would molest Gacy in his truck. He never told his father about the abuse for fear that he would be blamed for the incident. One of his high school friends recalled witnessing several instances where John Sr. would berate or beat his son without provocation. Despite this, Gacy did actually love his father deeply, but felt like he was never good enough in his father's eyes. Which is kind of a typical response for a child of an abusive parent, unfortunately. But so let's see. Let's recap what we have so far. So far we have, okay, unremarkable middle-class upbringing, okay. Verbal physical abuse from dad, okay. Alcoholic, addictive background, okay. And then we have sexual abuse from family, friend, and stranger. Like, we're hitting all the check marks, people. We're hitting all the checkpoints. Let me go ahead and skip a little bit. There we go. So of course, yes, in the midst of an abusive and traumatic upbringing, especially for young children, there are generally two responses, differing responses, pretty much opposite ends of the spectrum, to a distant and violent parental figure. One of them is fear. One of them is a fear response. They will, hide. They will be, just terrified of their parent. And the second response is a little bit more confusing, which people don't generally understand right away. It's kind of a response of where they desperately seek approval of that parent. They think that they'll do anything to please the abusive parent, to get on their good side, basically, in order to, I guess, maybe in their mind, if I do good enough, the abuse will stop, which of course we know is a fallacy, and we know that's not the case, and it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. But it didn't stop John from trying to win his father's affection. He consistently would do that his whole life, despite the fact that nothing he ever did he loved his father deeply. He actually did love him a lot, and it doesn't seem like no matter what he did, he always seemed to fall short of winning his way into his father's good graces. So Gacy Sr. would pass away in 1969, years and years later when John was an adult, but he still felt like he was never able to get close to this man he so idolized, and it was something he regretted his entire life. But still, he remained very close with his mother, Marion, and his two sisters, Joanne, who was his older sister, and Karen, who was his younger sister. So he was the middle child. The neighborhood he grew up in was middle class and average by all American standards at the time. It wasn't uncommon for young boys to pick up part-time jobs after school to busy themselves and earn a little extra money, and John was no exception to that rule. He had a newspaper route, and he worked in a grocery store part-time as a bag boy and a stock clerk. But he was also engaged in extracurricular activities like Boy Scouts, and seemed to really thoroughly enjoy like outdoor activities like camping and hunting and things like that. So, and while he wasn't really popular, what you would call popular in school, he didn't have a lot of friends. He did have a small, close number of friends, and he was liked by his teachers and his coworkers. So people seemed to like him and get along with him. And he had friends in school and in Scouts. So by all outward appearances, like if you were to look at this from like an outside lens, apart from the turbulent relationship with his alcoholic father, he seemed to have a very normal childhood, which is pretty... Cody, he's not very cute. He's not. And maybe that's what caused the dogs like, please let me go. Look at this photo, y'all. Like, that dog just knows he's like, the dog, look at the dog's expression. The dog's like, I already smell murder on you. And you're not even like 9. So like, this is going to go all sorts of slippity sideways. And I don't want any part of it. I am so glad that I'll be dead by the time you're an adult, because I want no part in the shit show that is about to unravel when you hit puberty. Like, not any part of this. Dog's like, you know what? Just take me out Yeller style. I want nothing to do with it. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done, John. You can put me down now. So, other than, this really creepy jack-o'-lantern-esque picture of him and the dog that would have none of it, old man. He does look like an old man, kind of. It is kind of funny. He seemed to have a normal childhood, which is pretty against the grain for a lot of serial killers. I mean, he did have an alcoholic and abusive parent, but that was not uncommon at the time. It's not uncommon today, even. So as far as like normal childhood, his childhood was pretty normal. And actually, like Bundy's, apart from the whole like older sister was actually my mom thing, he didn't do any of those things that growing up serial killers generally did. Like, or you see patterns in other ones that they start committing crimes when they're young. They get in trouble as a kid. They get put in juvie. They dissect and hurt animals. He didn't do any of that. Like, Bundy did do that. Dahmer did that. But he did not. Like, so there was really no 100% red flag as to what this was going to unfold into. There were a series of accidents that would stand out in Gacy's youth that perhaps could be pointed to as either motivation or the seeds planted in the monster that John Wayne Gacy would become as an adult. When he was 11, he was playing near a swing set when he was hit in the head by one of the swings. The injury actually caused a blood clot in his brain. And for 5 years, he would suffer a series of blackouts related to the clot that remained undiscovered until the age of 16. The blackout ceased once he was given medication to dissolve the clot, but one has to wonder what other damage may have resulted in his developing brain from such an undetected injury. So it did, he never experienced blackouts again after that. I don't even want to look at the center photo, y'all. My eyes, if my eyes could leave my skull and go 2 different directions, they would at this point, because I just don't even want to look at the middle thing at all. It very well could explain a change in behavior, and especially in those formative years, a brain injury like that can have really detrimental effects in behavior, depending on where it was located. If it was in like the developing cognitive part of the brain that deals with impulse control, especially, that would even be worse. I'd have to dig a little more. It didn't really say where it was on his head and where the clot was, but it definitely can have behavioral effects when you have something like that happen. When he was 17, he was diagnosed with a non-specific heart ailment. He was hospitalized several times throughout his life with cardiac issues and pain, but doctors were unable to pinpoint a cause to that. And he complained frequently about chest pain, especially after his arrest, but he never suffered any actual heart attacks, strokes, nothing like that, or other cardiac events. As Gacy got older, he either seemed to lose interest in school or become detached from his studies and his peers. And after transferring high schools 4 times in his senior year, but never actually graduating, he would drop out of school and leave Chicago for Las Vegas, which is where I live, which is really creepy. So yes, he did live here for a brief amount of time. So perhaps to find a way to find his own path as a young adult or escape an abusive home. It's not really clear as to why he moved. He did find work with an ambulance service in Vegas before being transferred to work for Palm Mortuary, which is one of the biggest mortuary chains out here. As a mortuary attendant, he slept on a cot behind the embalming room and would observe the morticians doing their work, because that's not weird and creepy. Not to say that I wouldn't do that still, but still weird and creepy. I'll go with that middle picture, y'all. So I've got, let's see, the Colonel, the convict, and the fucking night terror right in the middle. Like, I can't with this photo. It's no bueno. I do not care for it. So he would watch the morticians do their thing, and he worked there for 3 months and would later confess that one night while alone in the funeral home, this sounds like one time at band camp, you guys. I already don't like where this is going. He would climb into the coffin of a deceased male teen and would caress and embrace the body before experiencing a sudden sense of shock and like grossed himself out, I guess. Stunned at his own actions, Gacy would call his mother the next day and ask whether his father would allow him to return home. His father relented, and later that same day, Gacy returned to Chicago. After returning home and despite not having completed high school, Gacy would enroll at Northwestern Business College. He would perfect his talent in salesmanship there before graduating in 1963. But one thing was for sure, he seemed to have a natural talent for it and was a natural-born salesman who could almost talk his way out of anything, or as I guess they say, could sell ice to Eskimos, that sort of thing. He would take a management trainee position with a Nunn-Bush Shoe Company, and it wouldn't take long before Gacy was transferred to Springfield, Illinois, and promoted from a mere salesman to a management position. And it was here that he would also become engaged to coworker Marlon Myers. You can see her in this photo here. That is his first wife. Yes, I said first wife. This man was married more than once. So again, kudos to the bar being set very low, I guess. Original Ronald McDonald had triple homicide. Try 11 times that triple homicide written all over his creepy ass clown face. So it was at this time that Gacy's health would take a downward turn. He had gained a lot of weight and would start to suffer more from his health condition due to the increase in girth. He would be hospitalized for his heart again and then for a spinal injury shortly thereafter. His health conditions relating to his weight and his heart and his back would plague him for the remainder of his life, but it didn't seem to slow him down. During his courtship with Myers, he would join the local Springfield JCs and work tirelessly for them and be promoted to key man in 1964. That same year, he would recount his second homosexual experience. So I guess the first one being the abuse he suffered when he was a child, which to me doesn't really count. According to Gacy, he and one of his JC's colleagues would have drinks after having one too many. He invited John to spend the night on the sofa rather than drive home drunk. He agreed, and then the unnamed colleague would perform oral sex on him while he was drunk. In 1964, Gacy would marry Myers following a 6-month courtship, but would continue to hide and entertain homosexual desires. Marlon's father would purchase 3 Kentucky Fried Chicken franchises in Waterloo, Iowa, and then the couple would move there in order to run the restaurants. They would move into Marlon's parents' home, which had been vacated for the newly married couple, and he would open a club in the basement of the home where his employees could hang out and play pool, which, okay. I mean, that on the surface sounds pretty fine. Like, he sounds like a good boss. Like, he sounds like a cool dude. Like, you might want to hang out with after work. And then I got to thinking, okay, he owns like fast food restaurants, right? So here's the deal with that though. I'm gonna pause this right here. So when you take into account that who generally works at fast food restaurants? Teenagers, like teenage kids, young people. So then that took on a whole other dark connotation of like, okay, you opened a club in your basement for your employees who are minors to come hang out and play pool and drink with a grown-ass married adult man. No. First of all, how dare you, sir? And why? And no. And no. Just no. Just no, sir. I don't think so. And while he did employ both young men and women at his restaurants, he seemed to be only interested in socializing with the you guessed it, young teenage boys who worked for him. He would ply them with alcohol before making sexual advances towards them. And if they seemed shocked or rebuffed him, he would play it off as a prank, a joke, or a test of morals. Because that's not weird. In Waterloo, Gacy would join the local JCs, and he would give any spare time to them outside of his regular 12 to 14 hour work days. So the guy was like just like workaholic like crazy. At meetings, he would often provide chicken from his restaurants, and he insisted, this one made me laugh. He provided chicken from his restaurants and would insist on being called the Colonel. I don't know why I find that funny, but it's really funny. So those are his two children from his first marriage, which we'll get to that in a second. Those are his, which they are still alive, as far as I know. His two actual biological children are still alive, and that is them in that photo. He insisted me call the Colonel. Why? So while many found him braggadocious, he was praised for his high fundraising and worked his way up in the ranks rapidly. In between all the constant work, Gacy would find time to father a son and a daughter, respectively, in 1966 and 1967. And when his parents visited the family in 66, his father would later apologize for the abuse suffered to Gacy when he was young and said, quote, "Son, I was wrong about you." He would later describe this time in his life as perfect. After what seemed like a lifetime, he'd finally gained his father's approval. But as you guessed it, the perfect time would not last long. If it seems too good to be true, it pretty much is, as the urges Gacy was hiding for a long while would come bubbling up to the surface with disastrous results. So rumors had already started to spread around Waterloo about Gacy and his sexual preferences. These rumors were fueled by the constant presence of young men and boys that Gacy seemed to prefer the company of. Like, he just seemed to be surrounded by teenage boys all the time. And plus the seamier side of the JC's organization, which he was fully immersed in, this outstanding vice president of the chapter often engaged in drug use, wife swapping with other members, and hiring prostitutes with other members of the organization. So I was unfamiliar with JC's. To my knowledge, it is a typical like middle town, like we have them in Vegas, but like it's like a town organization that does like city and civic works and volunteer stuff. I had no idea that it was like, Fight Club motherfucking Sin City bullshit on the off hours. Like, I was like, why haven't I ever joined can they just advertise? If they advertise drug use, wife swapping, and prostitutes, their numbers in recruitment would go way up. And free chicken, just throwing that out there. So people heard stories that Gacy would often make passes at the young men who worked for him at his KFC franchises, but no one really seemed to believe the gossip because it was just that, gossip, until 1968, when sordid truths would be dragged out into the light for all to see. In August of the prior year, Gacy had lured 15-year-old Donald Voorhees Jr., the son of a fellow JC, to his home on the promise of showing him some porno films. Gacy then plied Voorhees with alcohol and persuaded him to perform oral sex. Over the next several months, he would victimize several other teenage boys, including one whom he encouraged to have sex with his wife first, before subsequently blackmailing him into performing oral sex. This is just wild and out. This is like, Roman Emperor's got nothing on this guy. Several of them he tricked into sexual activity under the guise of scientific research of homosexuality and even paid them up to $50 each. In March of 1968, Donald Voorhees would finally confide in his father about Gacy's sexual assaults, and Gacy found himself arrested on a charge of sodomy for the assault on Voorhees Jr. and the attempted assault of another teen, 16-year-old Edward Lynch. Gacy vehemently denied the accusations and demanded to take a polygraph test, which indicated signs of deception when questioned about the two boys, because, he totally did it. So, weird thing about a lie detector, they're inaccurate as fuck, but, if your heart starts beating and you're nervous when they're asking you questions, you're gonna fail. John, that is your real name. So he continued to deny any wrongdoing and insisted the charges were politically motivated. That's a kick in the pants. Okay. took a turn on that one since he was running for president of the Waterloo JCs, you know, because apparently in small town Iowa, it is Game of Thrones up in this bitch, and we are just throwing accusations to kill the king left and right, because, you know, that's how this goes, because it's so important. John. The police did find sufficient evidence, and Gacy was indicted on the sodomy charge, as you see here in these photos. However, this is not where the legal trouble for Gacy would end. On August 30th, 1968, Gacy would persuade one of his employees, 18-year-old Russell Schroeder, to beat up Donald Voorhees in an attempt to scare him and prevent him from testifying in court. $300 was the promised bounty, and in early September, Schroeder would lure Voorhees to a local park where he maced him in the eyes and beat him up. Voorhees did manage to fight back and break Schroeder's nose and escape. He would immediately report the assault to police and identified Schroeder as the assailant. Schroeder would initially deny it, but soon caved under questioning and confessed to the beating, saying that he did it at the behest of his boss, John Wayne Gacy. An additional assault and witness tampering charge was tacked onto Gacy, and a judge ordered him to be psychiatrically evaluated to find out if he was competent to stand trial. Because, you know, paying an 18-year-old employee of yours to beat up a minor that you sexually assaulted might smack a little bit of mental illness. What do you guys think? So 2 doctors would examine Gacy over a period of 17 days before reaching the ultimate conclusion that while he was legally competent to stand trial, he was in fact suffering from an antisocial personality disorder and would likely not see any benefit from therapy or medical treatment. Yeesh. So basically they were like, yeah, he knows what he did and he's okay to stand trial, but here's the thing, he's kind of a monster and no, we can't fix that. But he can stand trial? So the doctors also advised that this behavior, which is marked by constructs and traits such as sociopathy and psychopathy, would likely continue to bring Gacy into conflict with society at large. Oh, so even better. Like, not only can we not fix it with medicine and therapy, but he's going to continue to fuck up and be a problem. But y'all are okay with that, right? Like, right? That's fine. That's fine. A section of the report reads as follows, quote, "The most striking aspect of the test results is the patient's total denial of responsibility for everything that has happened to him. He can produce an alibi for everything. He presents himself as a victim of circumstances and blames other people who are out to get him. The patient attempts, to assure a sympathetic response by depicting himself as being at the mercy of a hostile environment," unquote. Yes, we can fix it. It's called a shallow ditch. It's called locking him up and never letting him out. How about that? That'll fix it. Prison fixes a lot of things. Not long after the health officials submitted the report, Gacy pled guilty to the sodomy charge against Voorhees, but not guilty pertaining to the other youths. Gacy attempted to claim that the contact between himself and Voorhees had been consensual, but nobody believed it. Shocker. On December 3rd, 1968, John Wayne Gacy was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison at Anamosa State Penitentiary. That very same day, his wife petitioned for a divorce and sole custody of their home and children. The court ruled in her favor, and the divorce was granted in September of 1969. Gacy would never see his first wife or his biological children again. While serving his sentence at Anamosa, Gacy was described as a model inmate. He seemed to steer clear of trouble and in a matter of months had risen to head cook in the prison kitchen. And as a 55 gallon drum works too. I'm for that. Like locked up technically at the top seals, right? Out of sight, out of mind. So there is an actual interview that's on YouTube. You can watch it. It's from 1969. It's this kind of like weird fluff piece interview where Gacy is being interviewed while he is at Anamosa about his role as head cook in the prison kitchen. And they're basically asking him a whole bunch of questions about what the Christmas dinner is going to be like at the prison and like how many people it serves and blah, blah, blah. It's very fluff journalism. But it's interesting to see Gacy in this environment before, you know, all these other things happen. So it is available. I highly advise that you watch it, just as if you're, you know, looking to round out your research as I do. You know, you want to watch any things for context, and even then you could see like kind of like the false modesty and delusions of grandeur a little bit, where it seemed to be very important to him that he mentioned that he was head of the, oh my God, that just scared me. Stupid keyboard. Where he mentioned that he was head of the kitchen and he used to do this. And it's like kind of anything to make him look more important than he actually was, I guess. And where they were like, oh, well, you know, how long have you been in here? And he's like, well, I've been in here for like, I think he said like 12 months or 18 months or something like that. And he's like, oh, I'm hoping to get out very soon. So yeah, that's fun. I advise watching it. It's interesting seeing how the mind works. So he was head cook in the prison kitchen. He also supervised several projects designed to improve the quality of life for the inmates in the prison, including the installation of a miniature golf course. Do I just need to go to prison? So let me see. When they were describing the food, it sounded awesome. They got like all this food and free pie and mini golf. You got pumpkin pie and mini golf. Tell me what crime I need to commit right now so I can go, because that sounds amazing. Because being an adult is awful. Like, what's that? I get my own room. I don't have to pay bills. I get free pie and mini golf. I'm gonna go rob a bank right now. Excuse. Pardon me. So he seemed well aware that being on his best behavior would get him parole faster. He would be denied parole at first in 1969, and in order to prepare for a second hearing in 1970, and I guess in order to look like a more productive member of society to the parole board, he completed 16 high school courses and finally earned his high school diploma in November 1969. Yes, you have to time travel to 60s, 70s prison. That's true. I don't think modern prisons are as nice. Unless I went to like a club fed or something. Like, who can I embezzle money from that I can end up in like a white collar prison? I feel like white collar prison would have like wine and cheese tastings and mini golf. I needed to commit some stock fraud stat, you guys. So got his high school diploma finally, even though like already graduated college, but then yeah, so weird. Kind of skipped that stuff, but went back to finish it while in prison. He would be dealt a severe blow only about a month later, though, when on Christmas Day, Gacy's father would die from cirrhosis of the liver due to his chronic abuse of alcohol. When he was told of his father's death, Gacy reportedly collapsed to the ground sobbing. When he was requested to leave, to do supervised leave. So you would leave under obviously the attendance of guards to attend the funeral, but that request was denied. John Wayne Gacy's time behind bars was already coming to an end, though. A mere 18 months into his 10-year sentence, Gacy was granted parole with 12 months probation. The conditions stated that he must return to live in Chicago under the supervision of his mother and maintain a 10 o'clock p.m. curfew. And then, so we see how already, I don't like where this is going. Already. Tax fraud should get you some federal time too. Yes. Sign me up for Club Fed. I want to play mini golf and eat pumpkin pie. Oh, I will show the painting. It's not too long after these slides. And I don't care for it. It is nightmare fuel. So on his release from prison, Gacy told his friend Clarence Lane, who picked him up from prison and remained steadfast in Gacy's innocence, that he would never go back to jail and that he intended to reestablish himself in Waterloo. So you're just a fucking liar, John. You're just a fucking liar. Because within 24 hours of his release, Gacy had relocated to Chicago in accordance to his parole conditions. He arrived there on June 19th and shortly thereafter obtained a job as a short order cook in a restaurant. Though his vow that he would never go back to jail was really short-lived. Also, see? Liar. It didn't take long for him to run afoul of the law again. On February 12th, 1971, Gacy was charged with sexually assaulting a teenage boy who claimed that he had lured him to his car and forced him to perform oral sex. These charges were dropped after the complainant attempted to blackmail Gacy. So why wasn't Gacy's parole revoked immediately? And why wasn't he sent back to prison to serve out the remainder of his sentence? That's an easily and equally frustrating answer. A simple lack of communication. The Iowa Parole Board did not learn of these incidents, and 8 months later, in October 1971, Gacy's parole ended. The following month, records of Gacy's previous criminal convictions were sealed. That seems like a really bad idea in retrospect. That seems like poor judgment. Bad judgment call, y'all. So there's that. So now basically to keep you up to speed, now he is off parole. He is as free as a bird, and his previous criminal convictions have been sealed so nobody can look into them. With assistance from his mother and in an effort to show how reformed and responsible he had become, at least on the surface, he purchased the ranch-style home, that one, at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue. He was quick to make friends with his new neighbors, Edward and Lily Grexa, who had lived in the neighborhood since the time it had been first built. After only 7 months of living in his new home, he was spending Christmas evening with the Grexas, whom he had invited over for dinner with his mother. The neighbors became fast friends and often gathered together for drinks or games of poker in the comfort of their homes. The Grexas had no idea of Gacy's criminal past or of his most recent run-in with the law. A little more than a month after the Grexas had been visited for Christmas dinner at Gacy's home, he'd been charged with disorderly conduct. The charges stated that Gacy had forced a young boy whom he had picked up at a bus terminal to commit sexual acts upon him. Apparently old habits fucking die hard, John. Gacy had been officially discharged from his parole only a few months before, but already breaking the law again. Breaking the law. However, Gacy slipped through the system when all charges against him again were dropped due to the no-show of the young accuser at the court proceedings. So he didn't show up, so they dropped the charges. He was a free man once again. On June 1st, 1972, Gacy would get married a second time. He married Carol Hoff, a newly divorced mother of 2 daughters. Gacy had romanced the woman who was in a state of emotional vulnerability, and she immediately fell for him, because if serial killers are not, if they're not anything, they're what? Charming. They're charming, and they can really turn on the charm and the magnetism when they really want to. So she was attracted to said charm and his generosity, and she thought he would be a good husband and provider for their children. Or her children, not his children, because he had biological children that were way long gone at this point. She was aware of his prison experience, that he'd been to prison, but she thought truly that he had reformed and turned his life around for the better. And Carol and her daughters quickly settled into their new home with Gacy. So this home right here, this one. Remember that house, y'all, because it's going to play a real important part later on into part 2. I love these little wines. They're so cute. The couple maintained a close relationship with their neighbors, and the Grexas were always invited over to the Gacy's house for elaborate parties and barbecues. And as flattered as they were to have received in such no invitations, I can't look at it. I'm sorry. Yeah, like, okay. Ugh. That just entirely, my soul, you guys. That popped up on the screen and my soul left my body for a second. Like, for a second, it was like, you can stay, but I'm leaving. Goodbye. No. So, all right. I'm not even going to look at the screen right now. So as flattered as his neighbors were to receive such invitations by the Gacys, they were always bothered by a horrible stench that prevailed through the house that didn't really seem to have any kind of explanation. Lily Grexa was sure a rat had died underneath the floorboards of the Gacy house, and she urged him to solve the problem. It's like, hey, you obviously have a pest problem. Something crawled under your fucking house and died. It smells disgusting. However, Gacy blamed the horrible stench on the moisture buildup in the crawl space of his house. But it wasn't a problem with moisture beneath the house. Although, according to him, the house did flood at points, and there was a sump pump in the house, and that was yet another explanation, was like, oh, the house floods, and oh, it's this and that and the other thing. You know, basically every explanation but the actual one. Gacy knew the real and more sinister cause for the stench and kept the truth hidden from everyone for years. Although many family, friends, and neighbors complained about the strange smells coming from Gacy's house, it certainly didn't stop them from attending theme parties. Gacy threw 2 memorable barbecue parties, which he invited everybody close to him. On one occasion, more than 300 guests showed up to attend one of Gacy's parties. That is a massive blowout, you guys. Like, holy cow, that is a party and a half. That's a party of legendary proportions. The 2 that were attended by the most people were a luau theme and a Western theme party. Both were huge successes. Gacy seemed to thrive on the attention he received from people who had either been to or heard of the parties. Yeah, narcissist, center of attention. There you go. He liked to feel important. Narcissist. Meh. Weird. Though through his membership in a local club, Gacy became aware of a Jolly Joker Clown Club, which, on behalf of the council, I'm going to need somebody to get God on the phone, because I didn't know there were such a things as...
To me, clowning, it was a way of relaxation for me. You regressed in childhood, you were able to relax, and you could be goofy if you wanted to, and still you had the sound of your face being covered.
No. I didn't know there was such a thing as clown clubs. Why? And no. And why in all of Christendom? I cannot. Okay. So these members regularly performed at fundraising events and parades and voluntarily entertained hospitalized children. In late 1975, Gacy joined and created his own clown characters, Pogo, who you see pictured here, and Patches the Clown. He described Pogo as a happy clown, whereas Patches was a more serious character. Hold on. Okay. A more serious character clown. Now, all I'm picturing is like Sir John Gielgud or some like Shakespearean actor in clown makeup as he is a much more serious clown character. One does not merely throw a pie. Bernice. I don't know. Like, oh God. I deal with trauma through humor, guys. This is how I deal. This is how I cope. Gacy seldom earned money for his performances, because who is going to pay for this nightmare right here? Who over here, over there? I don't even want to point anymore. Who's going to pay for this? Who asked? Nobody. This is the answer to the question that nobody asked. So he later said in that quote, which you guys just heard, that it helped him regress into childhood. He performed as both Pogo and Patches at numerous local parties, political functions, charitable events, and children's hospitals. Sometimes Gacy would remain in his clowning garb after a performance and briefly drink at a local bar before returning home. Gacy's voluntary service as a clown throughout the years of his murders led to him being known as the Killer Clown. Okay, time out. What in the cool, crispy, carbonated fuck is this? I demand an answer. For the specter of terror that is staring at me through grease paint and a sinister smile. I demand an answer for this. Again, someone get God on the phone. Speed dial. Hold on. You know what? Never mind, because I have learned 2 things for certain in regards to this photograph. One, that according to experts in the field of clownistry, who cares? Clowns don't usually paint their faces using any points or pointed shapes like the ones you see here, like the mouth and the eyes, because it tends to scare children. And 2, the second thing I learned is that there is no God. Look at this face and tell me that there's a God, because no. If any missionaries ever come to my house and ask me if I've met Jesus, I will deny his existence up and down, because I have seen the face of the devil, and it is this. It is this right here, this. That is a painting by Gacy himself that was done in prison. It is on a display currently. I believe that one's at the Haunted Museum, actually. And he hinted that there is a clue hidden to one of his crimes or one of the places he ditched the bodies in this painting. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, because he was pretty much a pathological liar at points in prison. He would confess to a lot of things and then retract them later. He would make excuses and claim, yes, I did. No, I didn't. He would, so no one really knows for sure if that's accurate or not, because somebody asked, they're like, why are there trees in the background? It's like weird. You're just like standing in the middle of a forest being creepy. And he was kind of elusive about it and was like, yeah, I kind of painted a hint as to where I buried like something like that. But no one's ever been able to find it. No one's ever been able to substantiate it. So it very well could have just been him again, saying things to get attention, to satisfy that narcissistic whatever. I really don't want to look at it anymore. But I set these slides for 3 minutes, so I have to look at it for at least 3 minutes. In 1974, Gacy decided he wanted to go into business for himself, and he began contract. Somebody just said forest clowns are the best. Now, okay, hold on. Point of order, time out. Okay. Forest clowns imply the possibility, I'm going to put my glasses on for this, of feral clowns. Is that what this is a pic? Is that what this is a picture of? Is that a feral clown in his natural habitat? Is this where we get clowns? I need to know. I demand answers. I demand answers. Are there feral clowns? I'm never going into the forest again. No. Never going camping. Camping ruined. Camping canceled. No, we're done. Yowza, that was a terrifying realization. Oh my God, no. I don't want to Google anything about forest clowns. We're good. So he decided he wanted to go into business for himself. He began contracting a business named Painting, Decorating, and Maintenance. Basic ass name, but okay, gets the job done, I suppose. Or PDM Contractors Incorporated. He loses points for such a basic ass name. He hired young teenage boys to work for him, surprise, surprise. But he told his friends that he hired such young men to keep the costs low. But we know that wasn't the only reason for hiring teenage boys. Gacy intended to seduce his young employees. His homosexual desires and his urge to inflict harm were slowly becoming more apparent to those around him, especially his wife. Carol and John had drifted apart by 1975, so they didn't stay married for very long. That is her in that photo right there. Their sex life had come to a halt, and Gacy's moods had become more unpredictable. After they had sex on Mother's Day that year, he would coldly inform her that this was the last time they would ever be intimate. Wow, way to kill the mood, John. Jesus. He would be in a good mood one moment, and then the next moment he would be flying into an uncontrollable rage and throwing furniture. Bipolar much? Maybe. He was an insomniac or workaholic, and his lack of sleep seemed to have only exacerbated his other problems. Gacy was rarely home in the evenings, and when he was either fixing something outside of the house or working in the garage. However, there was one thing that Carol was extremely worried about. It was not only that Gacy showed no sexual interest in her that hurt Carol, but what also pained her even more was when she began to find magazines with naked men and boys in her house. She knew Gacy was reading them, but he acted nonchalantly about his new choice of reading material, and she pressed him on it. He would get kind of belligerent and claim that it was none of her business. Finally, Gacy did admit to Carol that he preferred boys to women. He did claim that he was bisexual to her at one point, and naturally, and I don't know if he ended up going back on that and just saying like, yeah, no, I like guys more. But either way, Carol was naturally distressed, and she soon filed for divorce. The couple's divorce became final on March 2nd, 1976. So 2 failed marriages, and this would be the last one, but for good reason. So now he's alone in the house, right? So now no wife, no kids in the house, which that's just going to amp up some other activities, shall we say. So meanwhile, his dedication to his contracting business would cause the company to begin to pay off in large dividends. By 1978, PDM's annual revenue was over $200,000. So a pretty successful business, actually. But working for the company was an HR nightmare, to put it lightly. Gacy would often proposition his young male workers for sex or insist on sexual favors in return for acts such as lending his vehicles, financial assistance, or promotions. He also claimed to own guns, once telling an employee, quote, "Do you know how easy it would be to get one of my guns and kill you? And how easy it would be to get rid of the body?" Unquote. I'm sorry. Point of order. If any of you had, an employer tell you, "Do you know how easy it would be to get a gun and murder you and I could hide your body?" Would you or would you not just immediately quit and call the police? Like, I've heard of some really terrible places of employment, but that takes the cake. That takes the top prize, the mot juste. Like, I can't with that. Like, how did you not get in trouble for just that, sir? Right? Ooh. In 1973, Gacy and a teenage employee traveled to Florida to view property Gacy had purchased. On the first night in Florida, Gacy raped him in their hotel room. Ugh. Just ugh. After returning to Chicago, he drove to Gacy's house and beat him in his yard. Gacy told his wife he had been attacked for refusing to pay him for poor quality work. Yeah, because, the sexual assault had nothing to do with that. Lordy. In May of 1975, Gacy hired 15-year-old Anthony Antonucci. In July 75, Gacy went to Antonucci's home. The two drank a bottle of wine and then watched some pornographic films before Gacy wrestled Antonucci to the floor and cuffed his hands behind his back. One cuff was loose, though, and Antonucci freed his arm while Gacy was out of the room. When Gacy returned, Antonucci, who had been a high school wrestler, pounced on him. He wrestled Gacy to the floor, obtained possession of the handcuff key, and cuffed Gacy's hands behind his back. At first, Gacy threatened Antonucci, then calmed down and promised to leave if he would remove the handcuffs. Antonucci agreed, and Gacy left. Antonucci later recalled that Gacy told him, quote, "Not only are you the only one who got out of your cuffs, you got them on me," unquote. Ugh. Bleh. Bleh. This is just a shit show. This is a shit show of an employment agency, y'all. Wow. Sir, excuse me. It's a good thing he didn't have an HR department because he would not have a business anymore. That is him posing with Rosalind Carter, First Lady Rosalind Carter. It's a pretty famous photo. But even in this photo, apparently in this photo, there were already at least 6 to 8 bodies buried under the house at this point in this photo while this was taken. There were already people buried under the house. So you never know what a man is hiding in his crawl space, ladies. Be wary. So the assaults didn't end there. This continued. On July 26th of 1976, Gacy picked up 18-year-old David Cram as he hitchhiked on Elston Avenue. Gacy offered him a job with PDM, and he began work the same night. On August 21st, Cram moved into Gacy's home because, the wife and kids were gone. He didn't, he has a whole house to himself. It's a 2-bedroom home, which to me is a waste of a house if you have, whatever. Why 2 bedrooms? Why? So he moved in, and the next day he and Gacy had several drinks to celebrate his 19th birthday, with Gacy dressed as Pogo. I don't like where this is going. I don't like this man. I don't like this man. Gacy conned Cram into donning handcuffs in front of his body. Gacy swung Cram around while holding the chain linking the cuffs, and then said he intended to rape him. Cram kicked Gacy in the face and freed himself from the handcuffs. Good on you, Dave. Dave, you are my hero. You kicked a clown in the motherfucking face. I want to hang out with you. If you're still alive. A month later, that was the first attempt, y'all. This didn't stop. A month later, Gacy appeared at Cram's bedroom door, intending to rape him, saying, quote, Dave, you don't really know who I am, and maybe it would be good if you give me what I want, unquote. Cram resisted, straddling Gacy, who left the bedroom, stating, you ain't no fun. Cram moved out on October 5th and left PDM, though he did periodically work for Gacy over the next 2 years. Shortly after Cram moved out of Gacy's house, another employee, 18-year-old Michael Rossi, moved in. Rossi sometimes assisted Gacy in clowning, and he lived with Gacy up until 1977. And he'd worked for PDM since 1976. Rossi would also assist Gacy in clowning at grand openings of businesses, with Gacy dressed as Pogo, and Rossi dressed as Patches, more serious clown. I know, why in the world didn't they call the police? Like, I wonder if it's often because they were young men and they didn't think somebody would believe them. Plus it was like a homosexual assault. So they maybe didn't want to be labeled as gay at the time, which in the 70s was still like not really cool to do that. That people weren't out then. So I don't think they wanted to have maybe that stigma about it. So maybe that's why they're like, I'm just going to like pretend it didn't happen. But these young men, for whatever reason that fate favored and the gods smiled on, were the lucky ones. Gacy had been keeping a dark secret for years, and despite the smiles and public acts of service, at least 33 young men and boys would not find themselves so lucky. So you can see like the pattern of behavior once his wife and his stepchildren left started to kind of amp up. So he started to amp up the attacks with putting them in the handcuffs, restraining them, and either threatening to or actually sexually assaulting them. So he was almost like he was giving this a trial run or a test run to further, like, it just kept the line in the sand kept getting pushed further and further as to how he would proceed on this. And it would go in the direction that y'all are thinking. Hello, people who are just joining, and you missed the clown freak out in the middle of the episode. You're gonna have to go back and watch that. It was pretty priceless. Pretty freaking priceless. You see me have a meltdown about forest clowns and just clowns in general because they're terrible and they're evil and I hate them. So that is one of Gacy's business cards. He was a Democratic precinct captain for the 9th precinct. He was an alderman at one point, like actual elected positions in the community. He definitely put on a front and put on a good face, to the community, and made himself look as non-threatening and generous and normal as possible while you have bodies rotting under your house, sir. Excuse me. No. Yeah. So, I mean, he's pretty much the textbook case of a serial killer basically having a narcissist showing those two distinct sides of their personality. The overachieving face that they put on for the public to make themselves seem trusting and to make themselves seem trustworthy and a reliable member of society, somebody you would never suspect of doing anything. But then things like this happen behind the scenes. So Gacy's first murder, hey Levy, occurred on January 3rd, 1972. And according to Gacy's later account, following a family party on the evening of January 2nd, he decided to drive to the Civic Center in the Loop to view a display of ice sculptures in the early hours of the morning. He then lured 16-year-old named Timothy Jack McCoy, that is him in this photo, from Chicago's Greyhound bus terminal into his car. McCoy was traveling from Michigan to Omaha, Nebraska. Gacy took McCoy on a sightseeing tour of Chicago and then drove him to his home with the promise that he could spend the night there than rather at a cold and windy bus station, and then he would drive him back in the morning in time to catch his next bus. He was one of the ones that was for a long time unidentified, and prior to his actual identification, he was known simply as the Greyhound busboy. Gacy claimed he woke earlier the following morning to find McCoy standing in his bedroom doorway with a kitchen knife in his hand. He then jumped from his bed and McCoy raised both arms in a gesture of surrender, tilting the knife upwards and accidentally cutting Gacy's forearm. Gacy twisted the knife from McCoy's wrist, banged his head against the bedroom wall, kicked him against the wardrobe, and walked towards him. McCoy then kicked Gacy in the stomach, doubling him over. Gacy grabbed McCoy, wrestled him to the floor, and stabbed him repeatedly in the chest as he straddled him. As McCoy lay dying, Gacy claimed he washed the knife in his bathroom, then went to his kitchen and saw an open carton of eggs and a slab of unsliced bacon on the kitchen table. McCoy had also set the table for two. He had walked into Gacy's room to wake him while absently-mindedly carrying the kitchen knife in his hand. So that was Gacy's claim. Whether or not that any of that actually happened, because he claimed basically oh, I killed him by accident because he walked into my bedroom and all I saw was the knife and I attacked him. Almost kind of, blaming the victim for his circumstances. So, take that with what you will. But Gacy did bury McCoy in the crawl space and later covered his grave with a layer of concrete. In an interview several years after his arrest, Gacy said that immediately after killing McCoy, he felt totally drained, yet noted that as he stabbed McCoy and he listened to the gurgulations, I don't like anything about that word, and gasping for air, that he had experienced a mind-numbing orgasm. Ew. He added, quote, "That's when I realized that death was the ultimate thrill." So Gacy said the second time he committed murder then was, so now, of course, that one under his belt, he just continued because it happened and he didn't get caught and he got a thrill from it. So why stop there? So the second time he committed murder was around January 1974. Gacy strangled this victim and placed the body in the closet before burial. He later stated that bodily fluids...
I don't want to go into the fact that...
We're going to backtrack that one a little bit because there is an important quote. I want you guys to hear it. So the second victim, he later stated that after storing the body in the closet, bodily fluids leaked from the victim's mouth and nose, staining the carpet. As a result, Gacy regularly stuffed cloth rags, the victim's own underwear, or a sock into the mouths of subsequent victims to prevent that leakage from occurring. That second victim does still remain to this day unidentified. And there were a few that actually suffocated and smothered on the socks and cloths that he would force down their throats. So of course, then undeterred, once the murder gates were opened, there was no closing them, y'all. On July 31st, 1975, another of Gacy's employees, this man in this picture right here, 18-year-old John Butkovich, disappeared. Butkovich's car was found parked near the corner of Sheridan and Lawrence with his jacket and wallet inside and his keys still in the ignition. The day before his disappearance, Butkovich...
I don't want to go into the other... the five that I know about, just take it that I did. Butkovich is not one that I killed, so I don't know nothing about him.
So that was an interesting quote right there. So I'm going to go back. If you guys need to hear it again, I can go back and play it again for you. He's being interviewed. This is coming from an interview when Gacy is on death row after he has been caught and is facing the death sentence. There were numerous times in that interview he just denied everything up and down, basically, and claimed that I never did anything. Almost from the claims of I being framed to other people did it, and you name it, he had an excuse for everything or a way to try to explain, which most of them, none of them made sense. But there were times in that interview where he did slip up, and that was a distinct one of those times when the interviewer asked him about John Butkovich. He came back and had that quote where he said, "Well, I don't know, and I don't really want to talk about that." He's not one of the ones I killed, so I don't know anything about it. Okay, well, now a few minutes ago, you claimed you didn't kill anybody. And the interviewer does bring that up, and then Gacy just kind of tap dances around the answer. But that is one of the distinct times that he slipped up and basically admitted the truth during that interview amidst all the lies of his bullcrap. So the day before his disappearance, Butkovich had actually confronted Gacy over 2 weeks of outstanding back pay. Butkovich's father called Gacy, who claimed he was happy to help search for his son, but he was sorry that Butkovich had run away. When questioned by the police, Gacy said that Butkovich and 2 of his friends had arrived at his house demanding the overdue pay, but they had reached a compromise and all 3 left. Over the following 3 years, Butkovich's parents called police more than 100 times, urging them to investigate Gacy further. Gacy later admitted to encountering Butkovich exiting his car at the corner of West Lawrence Avenue and waving to attract his attention. According to Gacy, Butkovich approached the car, stating, "I want to talk to you." Gacy invited Butkovich into his car, but then invited him back to his home to settle this issue of overdue wages over the guise of having a drink. At his home, Gacy offered Butkovich a drink, but then conned him into allowing his wrists to be cuffed behind his back. How he did that, I have no actual idea. I have no actual fucking idea. How do you go from "you owe me money" to "let me cuff your hands behind your back"? Excuse me, sir, where's my money? Unless your plan is to cuff my wrist behind my back and put my missing paycheck in my fucking hands, then no, sir. I am not interested in your voodoo magic. Please give me my money so I can leave before beating your stupid fat doughboy ass. Would have been what I would have said. But that is not what happened, unfortunately. Gacy later confessed to having sat on the kid's chest for a while before he strangled him. He stowed Butkovich's body in his garage, intending to bury the body later in the crawl space. When his wife and stepdaughters returned earlier than expected, Gacy buried Butkovich's body underneath the concrete floor of the garage in an empty space where he'd initially intended to dig a drain tile. So that so far is now 3 bodies. Count them, 3 bodies already buried under the house at this point. But dear viewers, this is only the beginning of the shit show. So it just gets crazier from this point. The hunting just increases, and we know where all this is going, right? We know. We see the finish line. We can see it. So that being said, I'm waiting for the last thing to go away because I have one more slide. I was trying to drag it out, but I missed my timing. Like literally missed my timing? Literally missed my timing, y'all. But yeah, things only, the crazy only goes up from here. So please join me next week for part 2 in French. And the conclusion of Clowns Can Get Away with Murder, John Wayne Gacy, part 2. So I am opening up the floor to questions at this time. If you have any, please kick them at me. Well, don't kick them. I bruise easily. I bruise like a banana. Please, no kicking. This one, I'll tell you this. This one took a toll because of the whole clown thing. Serial killers already take a toll on the psyche as it is, but goddamn, that clown business is hell no to the no. I am no. Does anyone have any questions that I did not answer or that you are curious about in the background and early crimes of? Because this is just, we've just peeped into Pandora's box at this point. We ain't let anything out just yet. It just, the crazy goes up to 11 from here. Hi, Indiana Jones. My cat decided he wanted to join me on the desk, so we may get blinded by a tail in just a second. And there it is. As I predicted. Indiana. Sit down. Thank you. Thank you, baby boy. Crazy train. A little bit. Why did he choose a clown, though? Apparently that was... I hate to do it. I hate to say it, but it was almost like it was his safe place. Ugh, I just feel gross even saying that. Like, I don't like this at all. I feel like that was his safe place. He said you could regress to childhood, which of course, having an abusive, traumatic childhood, you have that whole inner child issue going on like he had. So I think in a twisted way, it was like a safe place for that broken part of his psyche. Like he felt comfortable there. It allowed him to be childlike in a weird, gross way. Hi, Riff Raff. Spooky Show Remastered, kind of. That's what the Murder Corner is, a little bit. We're kind of doing serial killer stuff on Murder Corner on Tuesdays. Hey, Frank. Yes, hashtag Team Rewatch. And if you have any questions that I did not answer, that I did not get to, anything like that, please do put them in the comments below the description. If you think of anything that you... Oh my God, cat, seriously. Oh my goodness. All right. Hello. So hello to people who joined. Sorry if I know you joined halfway through and I didn't get to say hi to you. Hello. He was used to being in the closet pretending to be someone else. That's entirely true. And that is an actual quote of his, is that clowns can get away with murder. Which makes me hate clowns even worse. As if that was possible. As if that was even possible. You know, the whole smiling facade, hiding the darkness underneath. Yeah. Yeah. So, next week is part 2, but I do have a slight adjustment to the schedule that we're going to be doing, I think. Just because tomorrow's Dead Hours episode actually is going to be not live. It's going to be pre-recorded. So it's going to be the first pre-recorded interview that I'm going to post. And I will do a premiere. I'll do a live premiere for it, but it won't be live in the traditional way that we're used to doing it live, where there's a live chat and everything, where I answer your questions. So this one's just going to be like a straight up video premiere of an interview. So I did get to sit down earlier today because the time difference is kind of why we had to do it this way. And I interviewed John and Victoria from GSI Paranormal about their poltergeist experience, where John was attacked by a spirit at one of their more recent investigations. And we go into kind of depth in that and show the video from it. It's really fascinating. It was a really great interview. So that will be available tomorrow at 6 o'clock at the usual time. I just won't be live on it with you guys because I will be traveling tomorrow pretty much all day doing scouting stuff. So I won't have time to sit down and do an actual live. And it worked out, like I said, because he's in the UK, it's 8 hours time difference. It actually worked out kind of nicely that way. So yes, I will be doing a video on Dahmer because he is my favorite serial killer. So if you guys want me to do Dahmer after Gacy, we could do Dahmer after Gacy or BTK or whoever we want to do, because we got through the 3 that were like top requested. So, yeah. So then after this week, I think just because I basically no longer have days off because I do Murder Corner on Tuesdays and I do regular Spooky Show on Wednesdays. It's a lot, and it's a lot of research. It's a lot of me sitting in front of a computer, and I basically don't have days off anymore. So in an effort to gain at least a day off back so I can do some other things, I think what I'm going to do is we're just going to move Dead Hours is just going to be back to Wednesdays now. But what we're going to do is we're going to alternate. So one week it'll be Murder Corner. The next week it'll be regular Dead Hours, and then Murder Corner, and then regular Dead Hours. So I'm just going to alternate the weeks because I may just work myself to death, y'all. Like I don't have time for anything. And I'm like, I may have bitten off more than I could chew here. Yes, Son of Sam as well. So we'll get to all the big ones, and then we're going to spread out to like the UK and Europe and hit some international serial killers too. So there's plenty of, don't worry about that. Murder Corner has plenty of material. So let me know the next couple serial killers you guys want to hear about the most in the comments, on Instagram, all of that. Let me know. Give me a holler, give me a shout, and then we will determine the next few Murder Corner episodes. Of course, it's not the Nope Corner. It's not the Nope Corner. It's the Murder Corner. So we'll just be back to Wednesdays after this week. So after this Wednesday, next Wednesday will be part 2 of Gacy. And then the Wednesday after that, I believe, is actually Ghost Club Paranormal's interview. So we're just getting back into the groove on Wednesdays, yo. If that's okay with you guys, just because I don't want to work myself to death. I would like to have a day off to do other things, because I do like 90 other things. So I'm like, I just don't have the time. There's not enough hours in the day. And there is Murder Corner merch up that is now available if you all are interested. It's kind of cute, if I do say so myself. So yeah, in the comments, hit me with who you want to see next on Murder Corner after Gacy. And I do need an assistant. And it's funny because I'm like kind of an assistant to like other teams. And I'm like, I just need an assistant for me. I see why people have like teams that do this stuff for them, especially with like the social media and advertising and stuff. Because after all the research, I'm like, dude, I have to do that too. And then like, holy moly, like I see why people are hired to do. Yeah, again, yeah, I see it. It makes sense to me, 100%. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it for today's episode. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for joining as well. I hope it gives us a little bit of, I mean, it won't give me peace of mind because that clown image, that's in here. That's never leaving. I had to look at that way too much last night. And I was just like piecing the slideshow together. And I was just like, every time I have to go past the slide, I'm like, I can't. Thanks, Cody. And thank you, Riff Raff. I do work very hard to make sure I bring you guys, it's my job to educate as well as horrify. That is how I do's. So, no, I don't have to go to the bathroom. I have had a lot of wine, but I'm okay. So I will be scouting tomorrow. I mean, here's the thing, is like, I like to keep a busy pace. That's my thing, is like, I like to keep working and I like to be productive and busy because, with everything being closed and stuff being locked down, like, I don't have a life. I just say that, it sounds sad, but I was like, I don't really have a life. I don't have a life outside of work. So I'm like, might as well make it productive, right? Yes, scouting. Absolutely. Cody and New Reality is going to benefit for some of the places that I am going tomorrow. So kudos to that. Haunted Side also probably. So I'm going to go on a little 4-hour jaunt and hit some places in Nevada and see what shakes loose. So that's going to be fun. And I was like, yeah, it's like a mini vacation for me. Who are those guys? Weird. Yeah, I don't know who they are, Cody, because they don't show up to my lives anymore. So I don't know who they are. That was shady. That was shady. Oh, and also, can we just see this for a second? Can we see the shirt that is amazing that I'm wearing without the double chins? Thank you very much. That is my Western Evil shirt. And if you can't tell what it says I believe in Jim Jones on it. So it is a Jim Jones Jonestown shirt. westernevil.com, y'all. They will not steer you wrong. I have so many shirts from there, and I need to there was a Gacy one that I didn't buy yet, but I'm going to, but it has a clown on it. So I'm kind of torn and I kind of hate it. I'm going to tell him you said that, Frank. Actually, yeah, you know what? I'm going to tell him you said that. And, we'll see. Kool-Aid. Yes, Flavor Aid. Delicious poisoned Flavor Aid. That's always one we could do too. We haven't done cults yet. Levy, it is westernevil.com. I will go ahead and type it in here. I'll type it right in there right now. Thank you, Cody. So everybody have an amazing night. That's the website in case you want some really cool shirts. They're very awesome and they're very well made, and they're handmade by an artist that I love supporting. His name's Neil. He's awesome. You should follow him on Instagram, TikTok, everything. So be safe, everyone. Have a wonderful night, and I will probably be back in time for my own premiere, but I don't want to promise anything. But I hope to see you on the premiere of tomorrow's recorded episode, interview with John and Victoria from GSI Paranormal. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and have a wonderful night. And I will see you tomorrow and then next week. So stay spooky, y'all.